Hello everybody, this is Paul from Aquariums and Gardens. Hope you're doing great today. Today I'm going to talk to you about composting. In particular, I'm going to talk to you about Bokashi composting. I prefer to use Bokashi composting in my garden for a number of reasons that I'm going to share. Most gardeners know that compost adds quite a bit of fertility to your soil. It adds a good texture. It adds nutrients as well too that helps plants grow overall. So using fresh compost sourced from local sources is a great way to add biology, nutrients, and fertility to your soil. So Bokashi composting is a little bit different than your traditional static pile composting. Let me step back 1 second. There are a couple different types of composting, a couple different methods for composting. There's vermicomposting, where you're using worms to basically digest, to process any of the food scraps, and from that you get the worm castings and kind of like a soil. It's almost like a soil-like structure. You add that to your soil, and it adds, not only adds biology to your soil, it also adds a good healthy structure to the soil too that allows the roots to grow and expand, and nutrients as well for the plants. So there's static pile composting, which I do have a static pile composter in the back over there. You might have seen in another video. So with a static pile, it's basically, it sits in one spot. You add your inputs to it. With static pile, you kind of need to be consistent in adding a well-balanced mix. So your browns, your greens, you might have heard that with regards to static pile composting. So I do maintain a static pile compost that I have been running for a couple years now. So basically any excess grass clippings, leaves I'll put in the fall, weeds that I pull from in and around the yard, I put them in there. So it's been working well in that I put stuff in there. You can kind of see it's processing I'll fill up the compost container, and then over time you can start to see it go down. But I've never actually taken anything out and used it in the garden. So obviously you do need to do a little bit of work in the static pile compost. You need to turn it. You need to make sure there's enough water, it has enough moisture in it. And that's one of the things that I don't necessarily keep up on. So in terms of the watering, I will occasionally water it, when I remember to, but it's not something like, hey, I'm watering my plants, I need to water that as well too. It's easier just to, especially with the drip irrigation and on this side over here, you just turn it on, let the garden get the drip irrigation, and then that's it. I don't need to worry about anything else. But with the static pile compost, like I mentioned, you need to turn it, you need to water it, you need to put stuff in balance, and then over time it'll process, kind of become the same type of thing. It looks like a soil, looks like an aggregate of some sort that you add to your garden. It adds biology as well as fertility to your soil. So the big difference, I think, with Bokashi composting is you can put a lot more inputs into that compost compared to your static pile compost. In general, we don't add meats, dairy. Too much citrus in a static pile compost can overwhelm it, so we don't add that. But in the Bokashi system, you can actually add all of that. So I've add, if you've got your meats, you trim off your meats. So those meat trimmings, if something goes bad, like some meat expired or something like that, you don't want to use it anymore, you can toss it to the Bokashi compost bin. So normally we don't do that with the static pile compost because it'll attract animals. A lot of the insects in there will just go out of control. You might even get rats and mice as well invading those piles for that. So whereas on the other hand, my Bokashi compost I keep indoors. It doesn't smell. It actually, it's in a sealed container. Bokashi is a Japanese invention. So basically what they do with the compost is as you layer it up, once you fill it up, you're inoculating it with a bacteria mix. So once you put in your materials into the Bokashi bins, which I'll show you later how I do, you also sprinkle on a Bokashi inoculant. Basically what that is it's a material. It's got basically molasses in there with the bacteria, and that inoculates the Bokashi compost. And so what that does is the bacteria then attaches onto the items that you had put in the compost bin and starts to digest those items. So basically you're pickling it. You're fermenting those items. So now you can add that Bokashi compost once it's done. You know, once you fill up the bin, in my case, you know, I've got 3 bins running right now. So once the bin fills up, you know, with all the compost mix, you seal it up, you keep it closed for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, everything's been fermented to a level enough where you can stick it in the soil if you want. Now, normally you don't stick it, you could stick it in the soil like what I did with this one here last year, is once the frost took everything down, I took the tops off and then I dug in a couple of trenches, 5-6 inch trenches, you know, across, and just buried the Bokashi compost in there and then covered it over. So you can't plant anything directly on that Bokashi compost for about 2 weeks because it's pretty acidic. So a lot of plants can't handle the acidity of it, and that can cause that'll cause plants to not grow at all, or even just kill them outright. So that's why I did this in the fall. You know, nothing was growing in there, so it was easy enough for me to cut it open, cut a couple trenches open, dig a couple trenches open, put the Bokashi down there, cover it up with soil, and then the year after, you know, when the springtime came, it was already ready to use by the plants. And as you can see, I mean, these tomatoes have been growing like gangbusters based on that Bokashi. So I'm pretty happy with the results. So when you want to use it during the year, like during the growing season, when you've already got plants growing and whatnot, you can actually use that Bokashi basically get it in a usable state by putting it in a soil factory. So what you're doing is you're getting soil. I usually just pick up soil from the big box hardware store, and then just on the bottom add a little soil, Bokashi, add a little bit of soil on top of that as well, add more soil on top of that, kind of mix it up, and then let it kind of cook, so to speak. And then after another about 2-3 weeks, that soil is complete. You know, it's ready. It's been the material inside has been digested down by the microbes in the soil. So it actually, when you pull it out, you won't even recognize what you put in there. So I'll do a later video on that, on how I do my soil factory, and I'll show the steps that I do that. And so once you do with the Bokashi, had it processed in the soil factory, then you can just actually top dress your plants in and around your plants. You don't have that issue with the acidity. Just top dress the plants. It acts like a great fertilizer. So like even with this one here, the only inputs I use with the Bokashi last year is I'll use a fish hydrosolate liquid that I mix in with water, and then an EM1 essential microorganism mix that I bought online that I also mix in. So I haven't had to fertilize these. Been harvesting tomatoes. You can see you might be able to see some red cherry tomatoes in there. So they've been growing great. It's something that I plan to keep on doing. Like I mentioned before, the fact that you can add your meats, you can add dairy products, cheeses. You know, obviously I think stuff like milk too, it's probably going to create too much of a mess. You want more solid stuff. So your vegetable peels, fruit peels, you can even add seeds in there too. Most of the Bokashi bucket itself gets acidic enough that it's actually going to kill those seeds. So you do have one advantage there too, is that those seeds, when you go put that Bokashi soil mix or Bokashi directly in the ground, you're not going to have any weeds as a result of that. So those are the benefits of Bokashi. I mean, it's a great way to recycle your waste, household waste, your vegetable waste, your fruit waste that the peels and whatnot. Put them in there. You're not putting it into landfills, and then you're creating a great nutrients for your plants. So come fall time, once the frost has taken down all these plants, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to probably run through a couple batches of the soil factory with the Bokashi, and then just top dress these beds, and that way it kind of blends in there. It's got good health, good fertility for the next growing season. So with that being said, let's go on inside, and I will show you how the process of adding inputs to the Bokashi buckets and adding the inoculant, and you can see what the process looks like. So these are the two Bokashi buckets that I'm currently using right now. It's two different types, I should say. I actually have two of these all seasons. They're called all seasons indoor composter They're priced at about actually about $70 on Amazon right now. Usually if you get it with a kit, you'll also get a bag of the Bokashi inoculate. This one right here is SCD. That bucket is there as well, is also SCD brand. So for a bag of this inoculate, it runs about $17–18 from Amazon, and the kit itself is the box itself is about $70, and you get that included with the with about a actually it's a, let's see, it's actually a one gallon bag of the inoculate. So I mean, to me, I did add this it's my own little scooper spoon there. So the measuring spoon, it just kind of gives me a consistent amount of how I'm putting during each batch, depending on how much quantity is in there. I'm putting like 1.5 to 2 scoops at most of the Bokashi inoculate. So this black bucket here is the newer one I'm trying. As you can see on this this tan bucket here, it actually has a spigot at the bottom. And so with that spigot, you're supposed to drain off your Bokashi tea. And the reason for doing that is just to help the, you can utilize that Bokashi tea in your garden. You can put it in your compost pile. So with these two, I've got 2 buckets here. I'll actually show you the other one. That's actually full. This one is empty. The green one, the green and tan one here is empty, and I started filling this black one up. So you can see this other one I have over here. I actually had to put a jar underneath it because the spigot slowly leaks. So it's a bit of an inconvenience. I just have to drain it every 2–3 days. This is from SD Microbes. This one actually has no spigot on it. So my plan is to eventually just seal these 2 spigots up, the one on these 2 tan ones over here, and just keep it like one without draining. I think that's just going to save some time and save some mess. Since these have been kept in the basement over here, I had to add this little drain pan underneath, because there have been times where it's overflowed, and that can cause a bit of a mess. It's happened there, so I put these underneath here just to kind of, in case the jar overflows, I can catch the overflow in that plastic drain tray. It's easy to wash off. So ultimate goal is just to seal it up completely and then go from there. So like this spigot here, this one works a little better. It did actually, the top of it popped off the knob, so I did silicone it in just to try and seal everything up. But in the past, what I would do is I wouldn't drain it at all. For a couple of batches, I didn't drain it, and actually I never had any issue with the Bokashi compost in there. It came out fine. I would just drain it before I emptied it out into the soil factory, and just either pour it on my compost pile or just kind of dilute it a little more and pour it on some of the plants, which in my case I haven't really noticed any great benefit from it, but it's an option. Like I said, with this one here, I plan on not even doing the draining process at all. Just fill it up, save some time and save some steps. With that, I will show you now the process of me putting in material, show you the inside, and show you the how I add the inoculate as well. So as the way I see this is basically a great way to supplement or completely replace fertilization. You don't need to fertilize your plants if you've got Bokashi. So as you can see in there, I put eggshells. I've got some leftover, some grapes. And one thing you want to do when you're adding in material is, as long as it's expired, if it's bad, gone bad, as long as it doesn't have the orange or black mold on it, then you're fine. You don't want to add orange or black mold in there, items with the orange or black mold, because that might overwhelm the process. It might overwhelm the bacteria that's in there and just kind of ruin the batch. And if that were to happen, it's just mainly just throw that stuff away and start over again. So in my case, I do have, you know, I don't grind down the eggshells. You might want to do that as an extra step. Some people just use their eggshells directly. They'll, you know, rinse them and then, you know, grind them up into a powder and use that as an additive to the garden. I don't do that. I just put it directly in there. And certainly it's not going to be available immediately. And so it is a layering process. You know, it's supposed to be anaerobic. So that's why you have the tight, airtight lids on the, like on this one here, you have an airtight lid, and then even on that green and tan one, you have an airtight lid. So it's anaerobic versus your, you know, outdoor compost pile, your static compost. Those are aerobic. You don't need to add any water or anything like this. And in this situation, what you do is you're going to be layering it over time, and then once it's full, you kind of want to compress it down, and then you're going to keep it closed for 2 weeks as the fermenting process completes. So I've got some material right here. I've got some watermelon shells, tea leaves, used spent tea leaves. Looks like definitely some eggshells, some tomato cuttings, some bread. So I'm just going to toss this all in here. And you don't need to particularly, you know, get in there and kind of even it out. You know, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I don't. I just let it, you know, just kind of pile it up. Towards the end there, I might start compressing it down a little bit in order to get a little more into it before it's set aside for 2 weeks. So now that I've, you know, added this layer in there, I'm just going to go grab my Bokashi inoculant here. Like I said, I just sprinkle it around, making sure, kind of get it everywhere and everything, just so that way the bacteria in the inoculant can start fermenting anything you put in there. And then once that's done, just seal it up until you're ready for the next batch. In terms of smell, I don't really smell. You shouldn't have a bad smell. It shouldn't be something that makes you gag. I mean, it is kind of a pickling process. It might smell like sweet, some sort of sweet pickle process, like a sweet pickle of some sort. If you've some of the vinegars, fruit vinegars, it kind of smells like that too. It also depends on what you're putting in there. So a lot of fruit peels, vegetable peels, you know, that kind of smell. Yeah, it will affect it. So as long as it doesn't smell like horrible, yeah, generally it's working well. It's working fine. So once you added your layer, you added your inoculant, you just close it up. You let it sit, and once you're completely full, then you let it sit for 2 weeks, and at least 2 weeks. In the wintertime over here, it gets cold when the temperatures are freezing outside. Then I don't do anything with it. I just I can let it sit. You can let it sit for, I've had a couple in there that, especially during the wintertime, they've sat for a couple of months. And once it's kind of warms up and then I'm able to go do some work outside, then I'll either, you can add it directly to your beds, or you can put it in the soil factory. As I mentioned before, I will do a video on how I do the soil factory. I've got one batch in the soil factory right now that's processing, and then I've got a fresh batch of Bokashi compost, that other bucket I showed you over there. So I'll show you the process of what the soil looks like after the Bokashi has been put in, and then how I put my Bokashi in the soil and mix it up and then get it ready for the next time. So until then, until my next video, hope you found this informative. If you do have any questions on the Bokashi method, or if you use Bokashi or you prefer some other compost method, feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know what you like or what you don't like, and what are your thoughts on composting. What's your favorite type of compost to use, and what benefits have you seen? And if you could, please like and subscribe to the channel, and that would be great. Thank you.